Well, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar where we explore the opportunities for energy storage or battery markets in the Middle East. I mean, is there a battery market in the Middle East? Everyone talks about the potential, about how much it can allow, more renewables in the different grids. However, what is happening today? What are we expecting for the future? How is the regulation being adapted for those markets so that they can grow and they can grow fast? With us today, we have a company that know a lot about this topic, that have researched this topic and analyzed it for a very long time. So I'd like to introduce to you today, first, Naim, can you introduce yourself, please? He's going to be our main speaker. Go on, Naim. Just make sure you unmute your microphone.
Me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Hello, I'm Naim Al-Shami. I'm an energy storage analyst. I work with the Clean Horizon. I'm here with the CEO of this company. We'll be gladly talking today about, as Belen has said, we'll talk about energy storage opportunities in the Middle East.
So where are you joining from?
We are joining from Paris, France.
Okay, excellent. Okay, now Michael, tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about Clean Horizon.
Okay, thanks, Belen. Thanks to Atta for setting this up, and thanks to all of you. I see that we have a lot of you attending and interested in this topic. So my name is Michael Salomon. I founded Clean Horizon 10 years ago in 2009 as a consultancy, 100% dedicated to energy storage. We are a company acting as a market analyst. We'll share to Naim some of our knowledge on the Middle East, and we also act as an owner's engineer, as a technical consultant. And like I said, the company is based in Paris. I am with Naim in the office in Paris, and we also operate from Miami to cover Latin America and the Caribbean.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, so here's how it's going to go today. And it's slightly different from other webinars you've attended. We're using a different system today. We're going to deep dive into what's actually happening in the Middle East. And Naim is going to be a speaker. He's going to prepare our screen. I'm going to ask some questions at the end. So please send them through if you want me to consider them. Okay, I have some of my own as well. But before Naim starts, I'd just like to say hi to Ishtak from CFS. We have Basmi Krishna from the UAE, Sergi Bosque from the Green Power Monitor. We have Alina from the Chinese Academy of Science. Welcome, Alina. Amro from RINA UK. We've got Navila from also India. Isaac from Inerco. We've got Simram also from India. Elvin from Berlin. Carlos also from the Jülich Institute in Germany. So we have a little bit of everything. Imtiaz from Riyadh. Ion from India as well, some more Germany, people from the DLR, etc. So thank you very much, guys. Welcome. Okay, please send your questions so that I can consider them. And Naim is going to tell us in detail, what's happening in these markets. Naim, before you start, this information, where is it coming from, so that we know where we can find the source?
But in fact, all of these information is contained in one of the studies that we've done here in-house. Now, mostly information are done either with our relations with the project developers, IPPs, or manufacturers, but also through available public data.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So go for it. Give us the presentation.
Okay, so we'll be starting with an exact sum. We'll be present briefly the energy storage opportunities per country, and what are the perspective for the upcoming years. So if I start with Saudi Arabia, the potential application will be for renewable integration. However, these opportunities won't be arising before the end of 2020. Concerning the discharge duration, it will mostly be for 2 to 4 hours for the chosen application. For the UAE, concerning battery energy storage, there are no opportunities can be foreseen for the moment, since other methods are preferred, such as thermal or power to gas solutions. Jordan is showing today the best opportunities and interest in battery energy storage, thanks to a multitude of projects that we'll be discussing later. However, the main application today is renewable integration and frequency regulations. Frequency regulation will be developed from now until the mid-2020. So for the moment, the discharge duration is fluctuating between 2.5 and 3 hours mainly, and it will change to 1 hour for frequency regulation purposes. Concerning Egypt, the Egyptian government has shown some interest in energy storage for renewable integration. But however, since some hurdles can be seen, the opportunities won't be seen also before mid or end of 2020, with a discharge duration of 6 hours. Lebanon, just like Jordan, has an ongoing expression of interest for 3 solar plus storage projects. So the opportunities are arising right now with the charge durations of 1 hour. So just to give a certain idea of the renewable targets and perspective for each of these countries, unfortunately, Saudi Arabia doesn't have much renewable today. Only 30 megawatts that are mainly off-grid used for either research or industrial purposes. However, a month and a half ago, the Saudi government has set a goal of 58.7 gigawatts of renewables by 2030, of which 40 gigawatts will be mainly sourced from solar, and the 20 remaining will come from wind power. The UAE today has 4% of renewables, with the biggest, which will be having the biggest solar park with the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum project. However, for 2050, it's aiming for a 44% share of renewables. Same for Jordan with Jordan with 25% by 2020 compared to the 5.7 actual shares, and so on. 35% for Egypt by 2030 and 30% for Lebanon by 2030. So I'll be going through that briefly, so that I can start talking about a country overview. I'll be discussing each of the following countries. Do not hesitate to send us your questions, and we'll be gladly responding. So concerning Saudi Arabia, this is an immense country with a rich, immense country with a huge potential, especially for solar energy, and with the immense projects that were announced. In fact, nowadays, there's more than 5 gigawatts of off-grid generation in the country, which gives some really high hopes for off-grid energy storage, especially after KAK, the King Abdullah City for Atomic and Renewable Energy, that has announced to allocate $2.7 million in order to promote energy storage research through demonstration projects, which it's called the Technology Localization and Commercialization Initiative. So it will be helping multiple storage technologies in order to assess their potential in Saudi Arabia, so that such solutions can be promoted on a local basis. However, despite all of this recent interest that has been shown through the last 2 months, there's still no regulatory or policy frameworks that tackle either the topics of renewables or energy storage or ancillary services as an overall. However, unfortunately, storage system were expected by 2021 thanks to the famous $200 gigawatt project that was supposed to have the largest utility scale battery in the world. But since this project has been revised and we don't know its fate for the moment, so such encouragement has been break down, and we don't know yet. So if we ask ourselves, why isn't the KSA pushing for more storage? It's mainly for three top points. The first one is the sensitive issues related to the current high prices for the standalone battery solutions. The other topic is related to the lack of information from financial side, especially for banks and investors, who still don't really know how to monetize such types of projects in Saudi Arabia. So more information and indications are needed, which let us think that the energy storage adoption will be expected on the mid to long terms, as I said earlier, not before the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021. To show you that with a bit of visual presentation. As I said earlier, on the generation side, PV plus storage PPAs have the highest opportunities nowadays. That was expected with the 200 gigawatts project. However, the opportunities for the moment do not exist, and not before end of 2020, but expected discharge duration of 2 to 4 hours, since these systems will be mainly used for arbitrage and load shifting. Concerning grid and behind the meter applications, for the moment there are no opportunities can be seen. That's mainly related to the non-existence of an energy market, since the Saudi electricity company has full control of this system, especially if there is no market for ancillary services provision. So now I'll be passing rapidly to the United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates has shown some interest in towards battery storage in the past year, especially with the Adwaya Abu Dhabi Water and Electricity Authority project that has the largest virtual power plant battery system in the world. However, this interest has faded through time because this system was used mainly for grid deferral investments, but Adwaya hasn't shown any further interest in battery storage. The same goes for Dubai, that has recently commissioned a project, a battery project has been connected to the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park. However, the system was mainly used as a pilot demonstration project in order to assess the potential of battery storage in the UAE. Now, as I said in the beginning, their main interest is more shifted towards thermal and pumped hydro. With two recent projects that were announced last year for a pumped hydro project, especially one at the Arabian Gulf of 400 megawatts, 2,500 megawatt hour pumped hydro storage at the Arabian Gulf, which it was supposed to be developed with a Belgian company called DIWI. Another one was announced in November 2018, also with an MOU with the French company EDF for a 250 megawatt pumped storage solution near the Hatta Dam. Another interest is shown in toward the power to gas storage, especially with the hydrogen one for mobility and power applications. That has been recently shown with the first power to gas project that will be led by Siemens and DEWA. This project will be exposed in 2020 such as a presentation during Expo 2020 that will be taking place in Dubai. Another collaboration also has been in place since 2017 between DEWA, Toyota, and Air Liquide in order to help developing hydrogen-powered mobility. So as we can see, a notable interest towards energy storage can be observed. However, battery energy storage is not showing real interest for the moment. Such evolution will be mainly depending on the results that will be given by the ongoing pilot project. So, as I've said earlier, nothing has been done since the storage project in Dubai of the 1.2 megawatt, 7.2 megawatt hours pilot one. Its project was commissioned 3 weeks ago. It was used on the generation side in order to study the PV plus storage applications. Also concerning the grid applications, beside the huge Adwaya BAS project that will be used for grid deferral usages, no further intentions has been shown for battery energy storage, especially since there's no market for electricity or ancillary service provisions, and there's no regulatory framework for storage itself. The same goes for behind the meter applications, since the existing flat tier tariffs do not encourage the adoption of energy storage systems, since the prices go higher with the consumption and the tiers, which doesn't really help energy storage that will be playing the role of a costly source of power consumption. What you can see in this slide is in fact one of our products that can be called the CHAS, Clean Horizon Energy Storage Source. Each of the projects has an extensive explanation of its users and the resources that we use, and all of the stakeholders that can be implicated in a project. So now if I shift to talk about Jordan. Jordan is an emerging market that has been showing a really strong interest towards energy storage. Today is the pioneer in energy storage from first sight, since it was the first one to show an interest in energy storage, but also from another second perspective, since it has been showing the most advancement concerning energy storage evolutions and regulatory advancements. In fact, it started since 2015 with our first project that was supposed to start with AES energy storage at 20 megawatt one. However, this project failed to launch. However, in August 2017, a 20-year PPA was signed with Philadelphia Solar. It's a Jordanian company that developed a PV plus storage project, combining a 4 megawatt 3-hour battery plus 20 megawatts of PV. This project was commissioned last month, which makes it the first one to be commissioned in the Middle East and the largest one concerning battery storage linked to the generation side. Another expression of interest has been expressed in July 2017 for a two-phase energy storage project at the Man Development Area. The first one aims to install a 30 megawatt, 60 megawatt hour battery system that will be remunerated through a 15-year capacity lease agreement for a total cost of $40 million. The project was supposed to be completed by this month. However, the regulatory laggings have not been allowing the accomplishment of the request for proposals and tendering processes, which caused some delay. A second and a third phase are awaited, but still the details are not available yet until the first phase is concluded. A few months ago, a second bidding round has been announced for the Aqaba region, where a 200 megawatt system combining storage plus generation is awaited. So we can really see that the Jordanians are showing some real interest for such systems, especially since a USAID report has shown that with the expected evolution of renewables that could reach 4 gigawatts by 2020, more than 350 megawatts of flexibility are needed. Such a flexibility can be provided by energy storage systems. So as I've said earlier, everything is summarized in this slide. This map is exceptionally interesting for IPPs since the Jordanian government often aims for a BOO model, a build, own, operate, which is interesting for IPPs since they can build, operate, and own the project, which is the opposite case in the UAE, where the example, the UAE, the utility, especially in Dubai, aims to buy the project, to buy the whole asset and use it itself. Just I've said earlier, the details of the projects are shown in this slide. So now if I go to Egypt, Egypt also has a huge potential for energy storage, especially with the ongoing renewable projects, mainly solar one, and especially Egypt has been suffering from lack of energy capacity issues until 2015, which led it to undergo a remarkable evolution of the electricity sector. However, despite at 20 megawatt solar plus 5 megawatts of storage project that has been announced in 2015, this project has been halted for let's say 2 to 3 years. However, recently the project has received some funding, and while it was supposed to combine different technologies of storage, we still don't know what its fate, if it will ever see the light or not. The Egyptians are showing some interest to energy storage, but not on the battery applications. More about pumped hydro applications, especially with two ones that have been announced, such as 2.4 gigawatts pumped hydro one at the Ataka mountain, and two other ones that are being studied for the Luxor region. So as I've said, no serious interest has been shown towards battery storage, but pumped hydro could profit from it heavily. So concerning the opportunities for battery storage, it should be coming as a PV plus storage combination, most likely starting from the end of 2020 for probably 5 to 6 hours, since the application will be mostly aimed to renewable integration and arbitrage. Just like the other other Middle Eastern countries, there's no current market for ancillary services, and also no regulatory frameworks for energy storage as an overall. So finally, if I go to Lebanon, just like Jordan, Lebanon has an ongoing expression of interest for 3 energy storage projects that should combine 100 megawatt of PV generation plus 70 megawatt 1 hour storage system per project. And this project will be distributed all over the Lebanese territory. The operation was expected by the beginning of 2019, but however, the regulatory and governmental issues have been delaying this project. These projects are supposed to be based on a build, own, operate scheme, just like in Jordan, with the 20-year PPAs. All of these evolutions have been following the 2018 capital investment plan, where the Lebanese government has shown its intention to develop the energy sector with $5.6 billion in order to develop it. So concerning the opportunities, nowadays the main opportunities are shown on the generation side, where PV and storage will be combined. The current PPAs are showing the most interest for IPPs in this country. The discharge durations are aiming for only 1 hour, since as we can see, the storage system are mainly aiming to sustain the PV production and to stabilize it. So just to conclude, I'll be talking firstly about the project financing policies. As I've said earlier, in Saudi Arabia, most of the energy assets are controlled by the vertically integrated utility called SEC, Saudi Electricity Company, just like other Arab frontier states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The government always asserts its public power to ensure the fairness and equality of all services to the population. So most of the renewable energy projects, including the storage one, will be mainly led by the PIF, the Saudi Public Investment Fund, who will be controlling more than 70% of the project, while being supported by international financial bodies such as Natixis, Societe Generale, and other banks, while the remaining 30% will be led by the REPDO. The REPDO is the Renewable Energy Project Development Office. This office has led the two first renewable energy projects in Saudi Arabia, such as the Sakaka solar PV plant and the Dumat Al Jandal wind one. Behind the meter storage financing methods are still unpredictable, just like in the UAE. However, in the UAE, Abu Dhabi gives a little bit of flexibility for IPPs, where 60% of the assets must be controlled by it through its subsidy called TACA. The remaining 40% also must be controlled by national investors with a 51% minimum share, while the remaining can be controlled by a foreign body. In Dubai, the same goes in Dubai. However, DUA has been recently showing a little bit of flexibility for independent power producers. Since before it used to buy all of the assets and assert its control over all energy related systems. So just as a conclusion, I'll maybe let Michael do it.
Thank you, Naim. So this slide there is, I guess, the repetition of the exact sum from the first page. But I guess what the message we wanted to get across quite simply is that there's two of them, but there's three messages. The first message is, when one thinks about the Middle East and especially in solar, one tends to be very much attracted by the sexiest market, which are usually thought to be the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which, as far as storage, is clearly not the case. Just to make the point even clearer, it's in red on our slide. So if we can get that message across, that's a small victory for this short discussion. The second point that I think Naim was able to conduct, obviously, hopefully, is that in a way, the Middle East today, as far as energy storage is concerned, looks a bit like Europe would look about 2 years ago, which is a market that is actually very heterogeneous, with very different conditions, country by country, and actually a patchwork of small opportunities in countries that are not usually seen as the first go-to markets for Middle East. And we made it quite clear that for us, we see a lot of opportunity in Lebanon and Jordan. What we didn't have time to discuss today, but there's other smaller regions in smaller countries in the region where energy storage seems to be making more sense. And there's two other countries that we can think of are the country of Oman, which is emerging with a few opportunities for hybrid systems, diesel plus storage systems, as well as Israel, which is emerging with a PV plus storage organized by the regulator. All of those things that we mentioned are actually included. You can go to the next page, Naim. Are actually included, actually the next page, are included in a report that, as Naim said in the beginning, that we prepared and which is available online at this website and on this link there. Well, it's unfortunately not free, but it's actually, well, for those who will purchase it, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Anyways, thank you for your time. While Naim was speaking, I was able to answer a few of the questions. If there are some more questions now, you should feel free to ask them. We would love to hear from you now or later. Thank you for your attention.
I have questions.
Good.
First, can you go back to that really great slide that you had with the colors? Because I think that's very telling. It's pretty much what you've been saying all along, but I think the colors actually make a huge difference to understand it. Okay, so you guys, for those companies that are looking to enter these markets, you need the report, because otherwise you're not going to understand the fine print.
Well, I didn't say that. I agree.
But you know, at the end of the day, that's what it is about, right? This company puts in these reports, crashes all the data so that you can actually, when you're looking into going into a market, then you understand, you know, what's behind it. But this market is basically telling us something that we already know. I don't think it's different with solar or with anything else. The reality is the UAE and Saudi Arabia are the largest countries, but they're also the most bureaucratic, hard, difficult to move. Is that right? So here, the countries that have the real need for the technology right now would be Lebanon and Jordan, correct?
Yes. Yes. And if you can look at the context, I mean, in terms of, first of all, yes. Second of all, those countries have issues, especially Lebanon has issues with the quality of supply of power. And, you know, it doesn't take a genius to see that Jordan and Lebanon are very close to Syria. Syria had a lot of issues clearly during the war. And those countries, as a lot of you may know, electricity generation is all about. One of the key point in ensuring a reliable supply of electricity is to have what's called a stable grid. And a stable grid, usually the larger the grid, the more stable it is, because the more generating units you have on the grid that are able to stabilize everything. What happened to Syria is that Syria as a country went down, and so the countries that were neighboring countries relying on it to stabilize their own grid actually had troubles and faced even more instability. So in a way, this is probably the fact that Lebanon and Jordan are countries where the situation is a bit more urgent and hence have more opportunities for storage, is to some degree linked to actually the war in Syria.
If you should allow me, Michael, yes, exactly. As you can see in the color code, since all of the top 3 countries are connected through an interconnection called the EIG-LST, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey interconnection, the let go of Syria affected especially the Jordanian counterpart, since Jordan used to import 97% of its energetic needs due to the lack of the national resources, which has mainly pushed the regulatory evolution for renewables and energy storage. The same goes for Lebanon. And as I've said earlier, for Egypt, that has suffered from serious undersupply issues until 2015, which is still the case for Lebanon.
And I mentioned 2 other countries that are not there, which is Oman and Israel. So in those 2 places, for different reasons, we have issues with I mentioned hybrid systems in Oman. That's because we have a lot of places that are not connected to the main grid. And Israel is kind of an island of difference in the Middle East, such that it actually behaves a bit like an island, well, for many reasons, on many fronts, and also on electrical front, because they're not really interconnected with the neighboring countries. So as an island, they face issues that are typical to islands. Even though it's a big electrical island, and usually electrical islands are favorable to storage because they need more stability and they need more ways to integrate their PV.
Okay, so we know why Egypt doesn't necessarily need it. You know, they have a lot of gas, so you know, even if they start absorbing renewable energy, they can probably deal with it. UAE and Saudi Arabia we're putting aside. We know Lebanon and Jordan, you know, are the main, and you mentioned also Israel and Oman. So I have a question now about, you know, most of what we've heard here is about government tenders, the large scale, you know, government saying, hey, mandating, if you like. But there is certainly also a new market of corporate PPAs also, you know, or corporate PPAs, I suppose, what it would be the commercial and industrial market. Do you see a race on that end and like of more battery storage also for this, for, you know, higher dispatchability?
For battery storage, not yet. It has recently started for PV, mainly PV and wind production, especially. We've seen a major project in Saudi Arabia with the NADIC dairy industry, in fact, where they chosen to use a 25 megawatt solar PV plant in order to have them reinforce their supply systems. Some such a project can have also been seen in Jordan and Lebanon on a much smaller case, but mainly for renewable systems and not energy storage. Energy storage still needs to be encouraged by the government, while the private initiatives are still rare.
Right.
If I may add one thing to what Naim said, the difficulty for I would say corporate PPAs. We're essentially now entering the discussion where we try to optimize one way or another the bill of CNI customers, and actually in most of those countries the electricity for CNI customers is more or less subsidized. So the rates and the rates are typically very low. For the electricity rates are typically very low, which tends to not really favor behind the meter storage. So this is to answer the question from the behind the meter point of view.
I mean, if it's low and reliable, then you're okay. In other countries, it's low, but it's not reliable.
Exactly. So. In this case, you want to go back to hybrid systems to be more energy independent, and we're more into the framework of the Oman case that I mentioned.
Especially since there's no time of use procedures, and the flat tier systems that are used by most of the Arabian countries, in fact, aims to make the electricity costlier with the consumption, which is not beneficial for energy storage, since the energy store will be used much more like a consumption source rather than an arbitrage solution that can allow some gains.
Okay, you guys, we're going to make this session short as we discussed, you know, just to, this is like a deep market short, but really quickly. But I have two questions that I want to ask, and actually people have been asking the same. One is technology, one is cost, of course. You know, they will always ask the same things. The technology, I wanted to ask what technologies you see actually developing. I mean, I see 1 hour, 3 hours duration is quite clear. We're pointing at one specific technology. But we have a question here that says, Imtia said, in your opinion, on storage battery technology, is VFB going to get major play? What is VFB? Sorry.
So vanadium flow batteries, I think that's what they have.
Okay. Okay, vanadium flow batteries, correct. Going to get a major share over lithium iron. And someone else asks, compare lithium iron and sodium sulfur batteries. Which one is good for utility scale storage? And then there's a question about thermal storage, but we'll ask that thereafter because it's got more to do with cost. So what technologies do you see in this region? If I was a company and had to invest in a technology, where would you recommend I go?
Okay, so quite simply, there's two alternatives in the region that we've seen. The first one is as in the rest of the world, it's lithium-ion batteries, which is clearly the bulk of the market this year. However, for longer duration storage, as we have seen in the two things. For longer duration storage, first of all, there was some discussion, as Naim discussed, of six hour storage in Egypt, for which lithium-ion tends to be less competitive than the alternative, which is sodium sulfur batteries from the manufacturer NGK. And actually, second thing, Naim showed an extract of our project database where we focused on the projects installed in the Middle East, and clearly the biggest one in Abu Dhabi is using sodium sulfur batteries. So for longer duration systems at 5 or 6 hours, starting at 6 hours, NGK sodium sulfur batteries, I think, tend to be more profitable, tend to propose a better business case than lithium-ion batteries. Now, as far as VFB, vanadium flow batteries, so the big issue with vanadium flow, well, so just for those that don't know what this is, in 20 seconds, this is essentially another way to make a battery using what's called liquid electrodes. So essentially it works like a small chemical plant, which has, we have two tanks filled with an energetic fluid, and when you charge and discharge a battery, you kind of change the composition of the fluid in each of the tanks. So it's very tempting, it's very conceptually interesting, because you can sort of separate the amount of energy in the battery from the amount of power that it generates. The amount of power is really the electronics and what's called the cell in it, whereas the amount of energy is just the size of the tank. So you have more flexibility in sizing the system. But the issue, and so of course it's cheaper to add fluid. So the longer the duration, the cheaper it gets per megawatt hour. So those batteries tend to have a better business case for longer duration. The issue specifically with vanadium is vanadium production is an offshoot of the manufacturing of steel. So it's commodity price goes with the price of steel, and for the past maybe year, or for the past few months, the price of vanadium has skyrocketed, such that today, if you want to buy on the market, just buying the vanadium to make the fluid, which in turn makes the battery, costs per kilowatt hour installed more than a lithium-ion battery. So right now, in the current market condition, I don't see vanadium batteries achieving some kind of competitiveness because of the commodity price of vanadium. Does that answer your question? There's some other questions that came up there.
Yeah, a bunch of them came up. You know, one of
Yeah.
them is asking you, what's the best battery technology in the GCC region? And I was going to ask you the same thing, because desert conditions, you know, the sandstorms, these are a thing. So do we know anything on that side about, you know, what has enough cycling, enough duration, enough, it's been proven enough for these sorts of conditions?
So your question is related to the actual condition, to the condition.
No, it's about what technology can better bear the conditions, or you know.
Okay. So actually, that's a question we get often. So indeed, the sodium sulfur batteries that I mentioned tend to work at higher temperatures. So of course, do work at higher temperatures. So one tends to see them as more fit for the region. But then, to be quite frank, lithium-ion batteries they always come with HVAC, so air conditioning, because you have to maintain them. It's very strict, between 23 and 25 degrees Celsius. So it's very low, a very narrow temperature range. But actually, what is the HVAC used for? Is usually to remove the excess heat generated by the batteries themselves. So most of the heat issues in the energy storage system, at least for lithium-ion, come from the heat that the batteries generate, because batteries have losses and that makes heat. So the external conditions, the heat, especially in that case, actually have a minor effect on the durability of the system. It may have a small effect on, okay, if it's hotter outside, I may need to use more HVAC. So it will have an effect on the actual efficiency of the system, because the energy from the HVAC comes from the batteries. But it's minor. Most of the heat comes from the batteries themselves. So it's not, okay, the fact that the outside temperature is hot has, as far as I understand, a minor effect on the system themselves.
I mean, it seems to me like if there is less efficiency, in the end is more cost, there is nothing to do.
Yes, but most of the inefficiency comes from the heat that the batteries generate themselves, not from the heat outside.
Right, okay. One more question, okay, several actually, as it happens. Pump hydro, someone asked about pump hydro. I mean, obviously there is a water challenge, in the Middle East, but yes. I mean, how do you see this developing?
Such projects mainly, most of the time require, let's say, 10 years of planning and construction. So it really depends on the perspective of the country and the geographical situation. In the UAE's case, in fact, they tried to benefit from the artificial Hatta Dam, but also they tried also to create an artificial system at the Arabian Gulf. Such projects are costly, so not all of the governments are able to sustain such budgets. However, when the opportunities are available, and depending on the needs of the system, they can be chosen depending on the perspectives. Such as in the Egyptian case, where they're trying to benefit, in fact, from the Nile River to develop such systems. However, for urgent needs and for fast gains, the most interest is more shifting towards battery storage systems. Okay,
thank you. Two more questions. One is, someone here mentions hydrogen. And there is the thing with CSP. Someone is saying CSP plus thermal storage is still cheaper than PV and battery. Obviously, we're talking about long durations, but what would be your answer in this both?
So I saw that question, so I looked it up because we had some research on this like a couple of years ago. Oh, it was a year. Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, so maybe older. So I know that, let's see, what matters in the end is the price of the PPA, so the price of the energy that comes out of the system. So as far as I know, the cheapest one that is in operation, or when we did the research as far as CSP plus storage, is from Crescent Dunes in Nevada, which is a 10-hour storage system at 133 euro per megawatt hour.
I know, but there is one in Dubai now.
Yeah, there's the Dubai one. There's the what's it called? The P-gas one, right?
No. DIWA 700. It's got 715 hours. It works as a storage, and it's $7.3 US.
7.3 US dollar. Okay, that's the one. So 7.3 US dollar, and that one is operational.
No, it's in construction right now.
So at 7.3, you probably cannot compete on PV plus storage, but at let's see, at PV plus storage for 12 hours, you certainly cannot compete with lithium-ion batteries. The difficulty in the PPA.
What would be the LCOE, for example?
Okay, so here's the question. So this is the question I was trying to avoid, because the issue is, okay, so take the PPAs in the US right now for PV plus storage. You're talking PPAs at 3 or 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt hour. But the issue is that price there comes from, it's very low, of course, but it comes from two things. The first thing is, first of all, there's a tax credit on those investments, which removes 30% of the capex, so which removes 30% of the PPA price. So whatever I said, you should add 30% to it, because it's just a tax credit they have in the US. But also, the other part of it comes from the other reason it's cheap is because a lot of the PV is injected directly. So in the prices that I mentioned, this was for storage, but for example, the one of them is the tender in Arizona at 4.5 cents. It's a 100 megawatt PV plant with a 30 megawatt, 120 megawatt hour battery. So it's a 4-hour battery, but it's technically just a 1 hour, just above 1 hour of the solar energy that gets stored and discharged. So at the end of the day, it's a bit difficult to answer the question of what's the LCOE, because it depends what's the ratio of the energy that goes through the battery versus the energy that's injected directly. If you were to do something stupid, which is to charge the battery completely with all the PV and then discharge it to have, for example, PV at night, then you would probably be very uncompetitive and probably on the order of 12, 13, or 14 cents per kilowatt hour. However, you never do that. What you do is you inject the bulk of your PV directly, and you use the battery, for example, either to extend your PV day or to make sure you have PV in the evening peak, to have energy in the evening peak. So when it's about shifting like they're doing in the DIWA project, which is 12 hours, then you're never going to be competitive, at least with PV plus lithium-ion batteries. So it's not a business case. But when it's about shifting 3-4 hours, and like I said, sort of extending the day a little bit, it's probably difficult to be more competitive than lithium-ion plus PV. So really, at the end, it depends on what you're seeking, and longer duration, 10, 12, we're not there. This is a game either for CSP plus thermal, or in some cases, perhaps hydrogen, although that also has some caveats, because you need to make sure you have a rational use of the resource, hydrogen resource. So I can answer on hydrogen if you wish, but it's yet another question.
I mean, the hydrogen, the question is, how many years are we talking about? Is this ready to deploy? Not.
No, so you can deploy. The issue with hydrogen is if you use it to make hydrogen, you need electricity. Okay, well, at least to do this in a green way, because you use an electrolyzer. Now, if you have a need for hydrogen because you are a fleet of cars driving hydrogen, in a lot of cases, doing hydrogen with PV is very cheap, and we can discuss it. Now, if you want to use the hydrogen in some kind of power plant to make electricity again, you're going to have so much inefficiencies in that chain that it's very rarely the most efficient situation. So it's very often the most expensive thing. So very often the thing you don't want to do.
So if you just allow me, Michael, to add something fastly. In fact, in the Middle East region, the UAE is the only country showing interest in hydrogen storage, but such usages are mainly about About mobility ones, since just like Michael said, the efficiency for power to gas then to power is not on the par for today. So mobility, green mobility solution are the preferred one, especially with the recent project that has been announced by Siemens, where they're trying to produce hydrogen by electrolysis in the solar park in Dubai. By using 1.25 megawatts of power to produce the hydrogen.
Okay, guys, so we have 8 questions. I am adamant we must finish by 5. Actually, we're supposed to be a short session, and it's actually going quite a lot. People are still there. No one is leaving us, so there is interest. However, I think we should have a rapid fire session.
Okay.
So we have 9 questions open. I would ask them, and you would just give me a quick answer, quick.
Good.
So that
Quick, I'll do quick.
Now we have 10. All right, guys, stop sending questions, because this is what happens. In the last minute, you get questions and questions and questions, you know, just as you're going like, So let's try to get through them. Maybe one of you, Michael, by the way, we can only see you up to here, so.
Oh, sorry.
Hey,
sorry.
much better. See you.
Sorry, guys. Okay, go.
Right.
So we insert. Okay,
Right.
let's go.
3, 2, 1. Which kind of batteries would be effective in deserts and snow for weather monitoring?
Depends on the use case. Probably lithium ion is good as long as it's HVAC'd.
Perfect. This is the kind of answers I like. Right. Do we have any estimation of the LCO of such PV systems with battery storage? You've just done it, but you can do a quick answer here.
So it depends on the usage, but usually when you do PV plus storage, you want to have maybe 80% of the PV energy injected directly, and then the rest that goes through the battery, so that the LCOE of the overall plant can be on the order of $50 to $60 per megawatt hour. And you may have, like in the US, some specific cases where you get some kind of tax rebate where this price can go lower.
Okay, that's perfect. Discharge duration in respect to grid load of solar PV plant project
I think
size.
the question is when I talk about discharge duration, we usually talk about the discharge duration of the battery. So example, the Arizona project that I gave was a 4-hour battery, but what was it? It was 100 megawatt of PV and a battery with a 30 megawatt inverter and 120 megawatt hour energy content. So the battery was 4 hours, but now when you make the ratio between the energy in the battery and the power of the PV plant, the ratio in my example was 1.2. So usually when we talk about duration, storage duration, we talk about the ratio between the energy content in the battery and the size of the inverter for the battery. So how much power can come out of the battery, not out of the PV plant.
Especially that the duration mainly depends on the application, after all.
Exactly. You have to do this precisely.
We're doing well because we're replying more than once because I haven't been able to read them all. So is there a system integrator training for battery energy storage system? Can you think of any?
Yeah, you can buy it from us, but you know, I'm shy at making advertising.
There you go. Right to Michael. He has your answer. Perfect.
There you go.
As per my knowledge, Middle Eastern countries need a very low cost solution as compared to other countries. Is that so?
Okay. No, yeah, of course it's no, everybody wants cheap. No, that's bullshit. Everybody wants cheap. Europe, everybody wants cheap. However, the leading manufacturers, if that's the question, today are mostly the Koreans, so Samsung and LG. This may change though, because those guys actually have a shortage in capacity and try to serve the auto industry that has more demand. So we may see more Chinese and more alternative manufacturers to come into the game in the next 6 to 12 months. Okay.
Perfect. What, according to you, should be a good ratio of energy from PV directly to energy from PV to battery to grid to have a good LCOE? You've already said it, but...
But I want to say it just really depends what you want to do. But what I've seen is it tend to be 60, 70, 80% directly injected and the rest through the battery. But again, it depends.
Perfect. In your opinion on NAS, which I suppose is sodium batteries, installed in Abu Dhabi for long distance discharge hours? Oh, it means the molten salts, the thermal storage.
Yeah. No. That's the NAS batteries, so the one from MGK. So our opinion on that, what is it? I'm very happy for the guys who sold it, right? So what is our opinion on this?
Now, for the moment, beside the Adweya one, the recent one in Dubai is mainly used as a study one. They're just trying to study the potential of such types of batteries in a desert environment. So we will just wait for their conclusions to really know about that.
Okay, so then the last question is: do you consider PV plus actually thermal energy storage in your studies using heat pumps? It's a very brand new technology, guys. It's still not really rolled out, so.
Well, actually, I kind of, but okay. So when okay, if there's so heat pumps, okay, not really, but for TES, actually for hot water, you know, for hot water. So as long as the end user has a need for hot water, there's no cheaper and no better storage than a water tank with a resistive heater, because that's really cheap. Unfortunately, it becomes a bit difficult to make electricity out of the heat there. So down the road, if there's a heat need, we're very happy because that's the cheapest need to fill, but it's not always the case.
Excellent. And just one last question for the two of you that is not in the, if you were a company looking at working with batteries in any way, shape or form, would you choose the Middle East or would you choose a different market? And if so, which?
Okay. So if I was a battery vendor or somebody trying as an IPP, what was who am I?
Let's say either actually, or both.
Okay, if I'm an IPP, I would of course go where I have you know, connections and money. The key markets for us, we made a forecast for the key markets for 2019, and as far as I'm concerned, if I recall, we mentioned East Coast of the US, West Coast of the US. We mentioned France. We mentioned what did we mention already? Australia and South Africa. And there's a few pockets of opportunities like Jordan, Lebanon, like Israel, and there's a few countries here and there that where energy storage pop up. So it tends to be a very fragmented market so far.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Naeem, for your great knowledge, and thank you very much who is attending. Looking forward to keep working with you guys. We're actually going to do other sessions similar to this on different markets. So if you're interested, do join us, and see you very soon in the next one. Thank you.
With pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.